What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to 8 Cubes with myself, KM Best, and Lamby series. We're going to start things off today talking about Marvel Snap's newest card, Beta Ray Bill, a 4/6 that shuffles Stormbreaker into the deck. When Stormbreaker is played, a 0/1, by the way, double Beta Ray Bill's power. And I am apprehensive about this card because we just saw like a big hype train for the Grandmaster, which obviously kind of didn't go anywhere. And we have Beta Ray Bill coming out now, and I tell you what this card reminds me of. It is original Thor. For those who are unaware, Thor released in the beta as a 4/6 with a Mjolnir that gave him +6, and it was just not a very good card. And I worry that even with the added bonus of having another Thor to run, Thor decks are not going to benefit from having second Thor as much as you think, as long as it's this Thor. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I am like, the curve of Thor into Beta Ray Bill into Jane Foster is really strong. But what it reminds me of more than anything is like a discard deck. You have your Thor, Beta Ray Bill, Jane play, and then you play your big, awesome 5-drop that wins you the game, like Modok, for example. And then on the final turn of the game, you play all your stuff with like either an Odin or with a wide variety of like, hit monkey type cards. But either way, the key card is, did you play Jane on 5? And I just don't know what Beta Ray Bill is adding to those decks. Like, Jane on 5 is already winning all of those games, it feels like to me. Like, it's a good card there. I just don't know if that's going to push those kind of decks over the top. What are your thoughts on Beta Ray Bill and where he fits in?
So I'm gonna get the card just because I enjoy sometimes just playing the simplest of decks, right? Just pure stats, lockjaw, zero cost cards, and then a 6 on turn 6. But I agree with you in that I don't think it will revive lockjaw for more than 48 hours just because people are trying the card. Like they'll try the card, they'll play the deck, and then they'll realize that like, I think what we have in the meta might be stronger than whatever Beta Ray Bill can make it wouldn't really make the deck better, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. Like the Lockjaw deck or like the Thor deck, right? Because like a lot of the times now, if we look at the Lockjaw deck, the classic Lockjaw deck, on turn 4 Jubilee is also a very powerful option that can spin out something huge, and you don't really need two Thor-ish effects. So I think this card generally will just see play because it's a new edition, but it will not affect the meta greatly.
And I think that's actually a great segue to our next topic. With the recent, I guess I would call it Grandmaster Fiasco, I don't really know what to say about it other than like, I get the sense that the Marvel Snap community, creators as a whole, were more excited about this card than they should have, and more hyped about it because it looked good in theory relative to how well it actually played. And I guess I just wanted to reiterate something because, as part of the Marvel Snap creator community, I do consider it part of my job to give you my opinion on these new cards as they come out. But I will say I am overwhelmingly more pessimistic than most. And that's not necessarily because I think that all of these cards are, bad or unplayable, but because I am always judging them on the standards of what they're priced at. When these new cards come out, they are priced at premium prices. Whether you like it or not, a new card is competing with you buying Thanos. A new card is competing with you buying High Evolutionary. And it has to be addressed in that context. That is how I always approach my reviews, is unless this new card is that good, you are better off spending your tokens elsewhere almost all of the time. And so for that reason, I was closer to being correct on these cards, but that does cause me to underrate a lot of the cards that actually end up being that good, because I don't get to know how good they are until I've played with them. I can look at them and be like, okay, yeah, that seems pretty messed up. Like Elsa, right? I was right about Elsa. But until you play with something like Loki, it's not that clear. And I think the main thing I want to bring up here specifically is new cards are competing for resources at a premium price point that it's unclear they deserve, while we know for a fact that there are cards in the game already that deserve that premium price point. Thanos, Jeff, High Evolutionary, just some examples, right? And new cards are at that price point by virtue of being new, not by virtue of deserving that price point. And I think it's just important to keep that in mind when you're evaluating new cards, that you have to compare them to what else you can do with that kind of money. And I think that is a very, very, very crucial thing that I'm certainly going to try to keep in mind a lot more. And I hope that this helps you when watching these kind of videos to understand where my head is at and why I seem to be so down on so many of these cards when they come out, because I am comparing them to the best of the best because they are priced at the best of the best.
Yeah, I think a lot of content creators, myself included, we fall into this trap sometimes of like being very inclined to make something happen with the new cards, right? Like it's because like it's new content, so content creators make content. But I feel like at least for myself, I haven't fallen into this trap super greatly. Certain cards I did overrate, but honestly, I think a lot of the time, a lot of these cards we need to remember that they're just releasing as new cards, whether it's 6,000 or 3,000, but their current use case is not like determined by their price. You know, some of the prices are just there because it's either 3 or 6,000 tokens. That's it. So doesn't mean that it's more expensive means it's definitely good, right? Doesn't mean it's cheaper. Like Legion was 3K, and look at what happened to Legion back then. Legion was better than most of the things that released at that point in time. So it's not like that doesn't mean that it's like a high value S5 card means must buy, must be good. Like content creators must make something good out of it. I think a lot of times after I've tested, especially like Grandmaster recently, right? I feel like the card. Okay, so I'm in the camp where that Grandmaster has like future potential, but I can safely tell you that as of now, right, his use is super limited, like super duper limited. So I do not advise people to just look at the card and keep like subconsciously think that there is a new busted way to make the card good just because it's a new card. I think at the end of the day, new cards are released just because they are new cards and it's either 3K or 6K. So it's very easy to skip stuff if you're unsure. That's what I can tell you. And even myself as content creators, as much as like I try to make things work sometimes, I can very honestly tell you that like some things are just not meant to work as of this point in time. But of course, if you're one of those people that has like surplus of tokens, just wants to have everything, then of course, yeah, just buy it. But like you must understand that some things are just not meant to work now, even if it's releasing now.
Yeah. And I think the main thing to understand here is that if you are buying anything in the first week and expecting any content creator really to give you an accurate 100% accurate summary of how good the card is, I think you're
It's hard.
expecting a little too much, right? Like the only times we're actually able to do that are when the card is extremely obviously broken the second you play with it. Like that Loki was the only time I think we were able to actually just be like it's day one playing with Loki, and it's like, oh, that's really messed up. Okay, that's gonna be good forever, right? But like even Miss Marvel, because of the context of the metagame, it took her like a month
Mm-hmm.
before everything got nerfed to the point that she was good again, right? Like she was a good card and she became the best card because they nerfed everything in front of her in line. And I think that like these are cards that have to be evaluated in context. All anyone can tell you is the contextual value of the card, not its absolute value over a longer period of time. But the real lesson I'm trying to say here is if you don't want to accidentally buy something that sucks, just wait like 4 days. just wait like 4 days for people to figure out if it's actually good. All right? Give it more time than like 24 hours and you should be good.
Yeah, give it more time than 30 minutes into the stream. Hey, Lamby, is Grandmaster good?
Grandmaster
I'll
good.
tell you I don't know. I always tell you I don't know. But yeah, okay, just want to add one thing to that point is that I think one of the cards they recently released that was just straight up good, if you're wondering, is Nico. I think we can establish that Nico was just in general good and it still is. So yeah, that's one of those things.
Yeah, but like it's not like Loki good. Nico's like good because it
Yeah,
has
of
its
course.
floor, right? Like Nico, I think I'd
Mm-hmm.
actually compare to Legion, right? Where it's like
True.
when the meta is right, this card is everywhere, but when the meta is wrong, it's got a floor of being in like one or two decks, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Nico, I had her at a B on my tier list because it was a floor when I made my tier list. But if your floor is a B, I mean, like that's an amazing card, right? Like you come out as like a B, and like that's unbelievable. Like Nico's a great card as a B, but like in that context, like right now, she goes in destroy, she goes in bounce, and she doesn't even
Sounds.
go in the Thanos decks that are Lockjaw decks because they'd rather just use that stuff for Lockjaw. So it's like she's definitely at her floor right now. And this is what I mean when I talk about all the context, right? Like, Nico came out in a ceiling meta. She was in every deck because Bounce was a dominant archetype, and she's an amazing Bounce card. Bounce is no longer a dominant archetype, so she's a little worse. That's just how that works.
Mhm.
I have been waiting for this moment for all my life. This is the segment where we talk about how Sarah is the best Zabu Miss Marvel deck and not Loki. I
Yes.
I am not even gonna say anything. I'm just gonna let Lamby talk. I would do an intro, be like, haha, we finally did it. I've been waiting. I've been here. I've been like planting my flag on this for a little bit. Lamby, you're finally with us. Tell me.
Okay, so I've also been waiting for this day for a very different reason. So firstly, yes, Sarah Tech has been the best it's ever been for good reason as well. Like, so for the longest time, my issue with, let's just talk about Sarah Tech in general first. My issue with Sarah Tech in the past is that yes, it's a deck that reacts to your opponent with tech, and then you win the games if you play the tech in the right places. But the overarching problem previously was that Sarah Tech had no stats. Like,
Yeah.
it used to be, all right, I'm going to Shang-Chi your thing, and then that's it. Everything else is small. So your opponent will know that, all right, this thing's going to get Shang-Chi, but everything else is small. I still sometimes can win. Now, Sarah Tech is basically plays Sarah on 5, Shang-Chi you plus Miss Marvel you plus Maximus you on turn 6. And that's like minus a 10 on your side, plus 14 on my side, and sometimes Maximus is another 6. So like, it's crazy because now Sarah Tech is the best it's ever been because firstly, everything got a little bit toned down. And secondly, you now have a lot of natural stats plus tech, right? Like in the past, if your tech failed in that matchup, you just cannot win because your tech is wrong for that specific matchup. Now you just need like, I mean, you have raw stats, you have Maximuses, you have Miss Marvel 414, you have Gladiators, and all these these can all come down like after the Sarah turn, which means you know where to play these like huge power spikes, plus the tech card, the Shang, the Enchantress, the Shadow King. So everything is like a perfect blend right now of like I can play all these stats plus I can get rid of your stats. It's like the best Sarah Tech has ever been. And it recently just won my 300-man tournament as well, very convincingly. Went 9-0, I think, in a tournament. And yeah, I think Sarah Tech, honestly, as much as I like Loki as a deck, and I like Loki as a Zabu Miss Marvel deck, Sarah Tech does it better now. Coming from me, personally. Sarah Tech does it better now.
We
I can
finally hit it.
Yes.
We
I can tell
finally
you
hit
that
it.
Lokiing a Thanos deck still feels better than Sarah Tech
Yeah.
into Loki, but other than that, Sarah Tech probably does most things better than a Loki Miss Marvel Zabu deck right now. And yeah, get good at Sarah Tech right now. I think it's a premium deck to climb with, whether it's Conquest, Ladder, whatever. It's just really perfectly tuned right now, right? There's even like some open slots. Some people play Legion, some people don't play Legion. Some people add one more tech, they play a Rogue on top of the Enchantress. It's really a bit flexible. Just that the overarching the overarching good thing right now is that there's a lot of stats in a Stera deck. Like, it's a lot of stats there, plus your tech. It's a perfect deck right now.
Yeah. When I structured last week's tier list, I thought about it in the context of like, here are all of these decks in these niches, right? It's like, here is Zabu and Miss Marvel, and that is a niche unto itself. It contains Loki, it contains Black Knight, it contains Sarah. And we weren't sure which one was the best one last week, but we kind of are sure which one is the best one now. And
Sure.
this structure to my tier list is sort of what got me thinking about like just how similar those decks are. Did you know that there's a list on Untapped that's just playing Sarah in Loki? Like, it's literally just the Sarah tech deck, but Loki
I
is in
saw that,
there. And it's
yes.
like, huh, I kind of like that, but maybe I'm coping a little too hard. Where it's like, I think that actually makes sense. I think that makes more sense than playing, with all due respect, like Iron Lad Devil Dino. It's like, I'd rather play a Sarah, right? Because that goes with everything else I'm doing. And if I don't want to play Sarah, I could just get rid of all that stuff with Loki. Like, at least I can have the backup plan of being a Sarah Tech deck if I'm gonna play Loki, or I should say the backup plan being Loki if I'm gonna be a Sarah Tech deck. But like, that's like a vaguely interesting proposal to me at the very least. Where it's like, huh, I wonder if that's worth doing. I wonder how
Mhm.
much overlap we could get within this archetype and see where it goes. Because at this point, I think it's time to admit it. I just love playing Loki. He's been kind
It's
of bad
enough.
for like a month, I think, but I just love playing him. And so even if he's like tier 2 and below, I will probably still continue to do so. So speaking of your tournament, the second place finisher had two weird cards in their deck. One was the Grandmaster, the other was Dracula in a destroy deck. Dracula in the destroy deck, I think, makes a ton of sense in the context of like, okay, we have a big guy in our hand, let's get rid of it. Destroy as a whole is going to dump all of its cards a lot of the time. You end up being able to do things like, counterplay people who play Killmonger to blow up your Deadpool, things along those lines. But mostly he's just, a big guy that you end up getting big guy stats off of, things of that nature. I gotta tell you, I'm not overly convinced by it, but you are. So
Yes.
tell me why you're overly convinced by Dracula and the Destroy archetype right now.
Okay, so my pitch is quite kind of strong point that I'm trying to make, which is I really believe that this Dracula and Destroy is a strict upgrade to our classic Destroy list. Why? Okay, so why? Dracula, firstly, what it does is that it's uninteractable. It's still uninteractable. So it's a 4-1 right now. It doesn't get hit by, well, it gets hit by Lady Deathstrike, but that's one other thing.
That card.
Yes, exactly. But like most people don't. So Dracula cannot get enched, shanked, Shadow King, whatever, and it loses you initiative to a certain extent because playing a 4-1 on turn 4 is always minus tempo, right? So what Dracula does, it reduces your reliance on having the nuts. So the nuts in the past was like popping X23 on turn 5, enabling 7 energy. So you go Deadpool, now 0 energy death. Now you reduce the reliance on having that exactly, whereby you can just play Deadpool and death, not exactly free death, just Deadpool and death. And the Dracula has a very high chance of discarding your null. Of course, you need to have a decent risk appetite for like a bit of a gamba because not always you just always get to discard the null. But I think it's a worthy risk because it solves the problem of having to draw perfectly, including like X23 on Q, stuff like that. My issue with this deck, as much as I think it's an upgrade to Classic Destroy, my issue with this deck is that I'm not convinced on Grandmaster's utility in this deck. So Grandmaster is in this deck. The one thing I like about it is that on turn 6 you can 4+2, which means you dump the Grandmaster. It's easier to dump with the Dracula, but I don't think that's like super important right now. It's just like a thing. So Grandmaster, what it is in this deck so far is it has replaced Deathlock. The problem with this is that Deathlock is still a 3-5. Like, it's still a 3-5. Like, you pop something and then there's a 3-5 there. Grandmaster needs you to have a Carnage of Venom on the board most of the time already. So I would say that Dracula, it's just a bit weird, right? Like, Dracula makes your low rolls a bit better, but Grandmaster then needs you to be a bit more on the early high roll again. So it's like, it like balances itself out. So I don't think we need Grandmaster in this deck. I'm not 100% sure yet. I think Dracula is a yes. Maybe it's still Deathlock and not GM. GM is something that I feel like just offsets what you are playing Dracula for, which is Dracula helps you with your low rolls. Grandmaster kind of needs you to high roll first, so it's a bit of an offset there.
Yeah, no, I would say that, like, if anything, the Dracula ends up in like the slot I was playing Lady Deathstrike in, and then we just don't replace anything with the Grandmaster. That's sort of where my head would be at. Let's talk about combo decks, because for so much of Marvel Snap's history, decks like Hela were like kind of a joke. Like, these were not serious decks, and yet in your tournament, one of them hit the top 8. We have had metagames that are dominated by Living Tribunal. Like, we have had those situations happen, and because of that, there's this weird thing that is happening where it almost feels like, because everything else is more toned down, these decks go so much more over the top than they previously did. Like, there were games in other metagames where it was like, well, they're going to play Hela, but like there's like 1 or 2 things in it and I can just do more points. And that just seems a lot less possible now in the current situation, which is interesting. Like, people talk about Marvel Snap right now. I've seen like people saying, this is a very good meta. We even have a topic talking about how open it is. And a lot of that is because like there's a lot of things on a relatively even playing field in terms of power right now. And that means that combo decks can really go over the top of them.
Yeah, I honestly think that, okay, so let me just mention firstly this Hela deck in my top 8. I mean, if you think about it, right, Hela's a straight up like casino deck. Like, for the most part, all the Hela builds right now require an element of luck. And like, if 10 people play Hela in a tournament, one of it can make it. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I would say Hela is like in the meta of sorts,
previously, there wouldn't be 10 people in a tournament playing Hela.
Yeah, now you're like allowed to play Hela and get away with it, right? Yeah, so it's more about like the meta now is a bit more friendly towards wombo combo decks. It's not such a shutout if you just like get countered, right? In fact, there's not much counter. No one's really playing Cosmo and stuff like that. Like, really, no one is really playing Cosmo. So I think you are like okay, not incentivized, but you are like allowed to get away with playing combo wombo stuff. I even see some random Galactus stuff here and there. Like this meta, you are like kind of like more allowed to do that with less punish. So I think it's good, but I don't. Once again, I don't think that these things will dominate the meta simply because combo decks, or at least the Hela Tribunal related stuff that we are talking about right now, is still relatively linear in like what they plan to do. Right? It's like either you have it or you don't, and if you have it, you don't get 8 cubes if someone knows that you have it. And most of the time, if you have it, it's quite obvious. So I think these combo-ish style decks are like valid now, but not game changing.
Yeah. But that's good that they're valid, I think.
It's
If they
good. It's
were
good.
game changing, it would be a terrible, awful meta.
It's
But
like when
they're
Galactus
good.
was game changing.
Yes. It's like it's good
That's
that they're
scary. It's
valid.
not
It's
fun.
not good if they're everywhere. And that's a good
Yes.
balance to have. All right, I am going to talk about something that really grinds my gears right now. It is the card Lockjaw. When the first season of Marvel Snap ever happened in the beta, the Wave season, which I guess technically was the second season ever, but whatever. The Wave season was the first battle pass. They did a little test leaderboard thing, and I came in fourth place on it. And they got the top 10 people on that leaderboard, and they asked us questions. We did a little text interview in the Marvel Snap Discord. And I remember being asked, what cards would you nerf? And I said Lockjaw. Lockjaw is just like, it might not be a problem now. It's not a problem now, but there's no way it doesn't become a problem in the future. And I feel more than 18 months later that I have never been more right about anything in my entire life. Lockjaw is a card that I truly dislike right now in the context of specifically Thanos. I feel like it holds Thanos back as an archetype in terms of card design, where it turns Thanos into this deck that is entirely built around ramping out big stuff before your opponent can. And to be clear, the Time Stone is also a huge contributor to this kind of Thanos. But Lockjaw, I think, is worse because in a Lockjaw Thanos deck, your stones aren't cards. People complain about Thanos' design because Thanos himself is basically not a card in his own decks, right? And that makes sense. A lot of his power is loaded onto the stones. But a Lockjaw version of the Thanos deck makes the stones' abilities matter even less. It turns the entire deck into, I am going to throw this into Lockjaw and then play something elsewhere. Like, that is the entirety. Every stone, it's not like you would ever use a stone for its ability when you can use it for a Lockjaw. And I think that it turns the stones into like poker chips, basically, that you're just throwing around and gambling with. And I don't like that at all. I also think that the existence of Lockjaw will always push Thanos to be a Lockjaw deck. The only time Thanos has been super relevant and not been a Lockjaw deck was when the things that you would be playing on that 5 slot were bad out of Lockjaw. Cards like Professor X, cards like Eliath, these were cards that you didn't want to see out of Lockjaw. You needed to do specific things. And those cards were problems, and that's why they were addressed. And as soon as they were addressed, Thanos just goes right back to being a Lockjaw deck, because why would you do anything else with the shell? When you queue into the Lockjaw mirror, they just cheat and do bigger things than you. And so Lockjaw exists as this, I almost feel like it's limiting the archetype from ever doing anything other than it, right? Like, it will only ever be a Lockjaw deck as long as Lockjaw exists, unless they print something stupid and broken, in which case it will be the something stupid and broken deck. That thing gets nerfed, it goes back to being Lockjaw. And I just don't like that dynamic. I hate it. When you think about a card like Cull Obsidian that was clearly made to be used with Thanos, why would you play a 4/9 when you could play a 1/12? It's a whole thing where I think Lockjaw and Thanos specifically, that combination of cards, is deleterious to not just game design, but to Thanos as an archetype, because it's still doing the same stuff it was doing a year ago. It has not had any chances to grow, and that's because of Lockjaw.
Yeah. So I agree and disagree. I agree firstly that firstly, Thanos Lockjaw. Lockjaw itself is really limiting the growth space of the Thanos archetype, right? Like whether we need change or not, I'm not 100% sure. But I can agree that it's really limiting the design of Thanos Thanos archetype, because like everything gravitates back to Thanos Lockjaw, right? The best thing to do with Thanos is really just Thanos Lockjaw. And to echo your sentiment on the Cow Obsidian one. My first look at Cow Obsidian was that I would not want to play this in Thanos. I want to play this in a Zabu
Yeah.
deck with 1 cost cards, which could be a high evo thing because they also sometimes runs Enchantress Shank thing and Abomination, all that kind of good stuff. So a 4/9 is like better there because it's a tempo thing, right? So Cow Obsidian being released supposedly for Thanos might not change the dynamic of the deck to a tempo Thanos deck, because I don't see a tempo Thanos deck beating 1 cost becoming a blob and then win from there, you know. So I think Thanos Lockjaw right now is in a spot whereby there's like not many better things to do than Lockjaw in Thanos. Like I tried playing Jail Thanos, like Aliyah Professor X. Like it worked for a period because people were not caring about Alive and Prof in Thanos. But once people realized that like that was like what I was doing, right? Like it became strictly worse than Thanos Lockjaw because no scams, no surprise, no more cubes to just secretly get off my opponent for not realizing this. So in terms of just pure like power, Thanos Lockjaw is like unmatched in terms of potential Thanos archetypes, which means that if Lockjaw stays the way he is, okay. So where I don't agree is that like I might think that I personally think that like it's fine to leave it as it is. I don't need change in Thanos, but if we were to get Thanos to do anything different, I agree that the Lockjaw needs to go.
Yeah,
Changed.
I just
Yeah.
feel like I am, when you look at like the future, right? I don't know how far out in the data mines you've looked.
Mhm.
It just feels like the existence of this is limiting in a way that very few other cards actually are. Like people like to meme about like design space being limited because of like Mr. Negative or whatever, which is, as far as we know, just like not really a thing that has ever really happened because Mr. Negative sucks. But the difference is Thanos Lockjaw is really good and actually does limit design space because of that. Like when you look at like various cards that have been broken, it is a deck that has broken multiple cards before. Like my pitch for Thanos Lockjaw is like, okay, here's the deal. We're gonna nuke Lockjaw and we're gonna give Soulstone the drawback. Would you take
Yep.
that deal as a Thanos player? Like if I sent you the guy doing this meme, would you take that deal? Like I want to know.
Yeah, so with the way that the cards are being released in the future, I actually would take that deal straight up because I personally am someone that am quite good at using the stones as the stones. Like I know how to use them for what they're worth.
That's what
But
Thanos should be about.
correct,
That's my whole point. It's like the stones, they
correct.
shouldn't matter. You're adding these cards to your deck and they should matter. They shouldn't just be rocks you throw in Lockjaw.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? So yeah, I agree with you because like now with Lockjaw, like when I draw Lockjaw, I would say that like a lot of the time, these like value of the stones becomes just cost they cost 1. You
Yeah.
know,
They cost one and draw a card.
I
You put them in a
believe
Lockjaw.
I believe there is a way, but the thing is, with the way Thanos is right now, right? Like you said, because Soulstone doesn't draw, and there's a few other things. Maybe revert the Space Stone. Like I guess if you completely nuke Lockjaw, you give him back the old Space Stone and the Soulstone. I think it's fine. I think just Soulstone is not enough. But if you want to put emphasis on the stones being real cards, you give us back the OG Soulstone and Space Stone, then you nuke Lockjaw, and I think we should be fine.
Next up is the strongest card in Marvel Snap. That's Shang-Chi. Almost a 40% play rate, a significantly high win rate. This is one of the best cards in the game. I would say the best card in the game. Without Shang-Chi, I don't even know what this game looks like. He has been the format police for so long. And I think that leads to some, ill feeling about a guy when this guy's in 40% of decks post infinite. I get why people would be kind of sick of him. I am here to offer an impassioned defense of Shang-Chi. Here is my defense of Shang-Chi. First, it's a free-to-play card. Never nerf free-to-play cards if you can help it. I'm 100% serious about that. If you can help it, never do it. Now, I assume that the argument would then be, you can't help it. You should do something about this card. And I guess my question is, I just don't know what. I do think that taking a point of power off of him would be kind of free. And I am generally someone who thinks if you can take a point of power off for free, there's no reason not to do it. But I think
Mhm.
specifically Shang-Chi being a series 1 to 2 card, I believe he's series 2, is so important to those players scaling up as they gain collection level. Like, he is maybe the last card in the world I would want to nerf because he's what keeps those players in games. And I think that is incredibly important. But what I do want to do, and this might be controversial, I want to buff the other tech cards until they're as good as he is. For example, I want Enchanters to be a 4/6 again. That's what I want. I want that kind of stuff to happen. I want those series 1 and 2 cards to really matter. I want Enchantress to be as good as Shadow King, which she's actually close right now. 4/6 would probably do it. Like, I want Rogue. I think Rogue is actually probably one of the strongest of them already. Like, I want Rogue to be relevant all the time. I want your option. But I think more than anything else, the interesting thing for me is when it looks at ongoing, there's Echo, Rogue, Enchantress. There's nothing that does what Shang does other than Shang in terms of removing base power. And I guess my question is there a way of introducing some other things that can do that? Because I don't want to nerf this guy because of the role he plays as an early game tool. So is there a way of introducing other things in that lane? And I know it sounds weird, but Super Giant actually strikes me as a card that is in that lane. Like, it's a tech card, not against, the specific stuff Shang does, but it's like an alternate tech card. And I just feel like there needs to be more competition for that 4-cost tech card that beats a certain thing. The issue Shang has is he's just so ubiquitous. Like, everything is going to be playing something big most of the time, right? Unless your deck is built to not do that, you're probably going to play something that he can hit. And I am struck by the lack of alternatives to Shang. Because Shang is not just the only way to deal with something as base power, it's also the one that's going to be dead the least often. And brings me back to the Enchantress thing. Like, if Enchantress were just a straight up 4/6, I feel like she would basically never be dead, and it would be much easier and safer to just, like, slap her in whatever deck because of that. What are your thoughts on Shang-Chi, the nerf potential for this card, and his, like, special role in the metagame as, like, I guess, consideration number 1?
Right. Shang-Chi is honestly a card that has no equal in the game
Yeah.
because basically what Shang-Chi is that, okay, before I go on to talk about the tech cards, let's talk about what Shang-Chi is. But Shang-Chi is just basically very simple, right? You play a 4/3, which is never a 4/3, it's a 4/13 or 4, like it can be a 4/23 if you blow up a blob, for example. So like Shang-Chi's effect is unique in itself, in which it's like it's the you cannot have another Shang-Chi like card. The only way you can have two similar cards that are like another Shang-Chi-ish card is that you make this Shang-Chi a lot worse by doing something else, by changing its effect. Then you can print another card that is like doing a similar destroy something effect, but both are equally worse than the current Shang-Chi. That's like the only thing you can do, right? So I think dropping a power off of Shang-Chi is 100% fine, even if it's a free-to-play card. Because dropping Shang-Chi to 4/2 means it turns from like a killer 4/10, so 4/13 into a 4/12. I mean, it's fine. It's still
Yeah.
crazy strong. So I think dropping a power of Shang-Chi, to me, completely not necessary, but like it can be done. But I think thinking about what you just said about like buffing all the other tech cards. So what's the line here? Like, because getting rid of like ongoing synergies like with Enchantress, like you mentioned earlier, those don't actually kill base stats. And Shang-Chi is
Yeah.
like the god of killing base stats, right? So the only time it really kills base stats currently to me is like Shadow King killing a blob because it goes down to 0, right?
Right.
But like now if you Enchantress a Dino, it's still a 5/3. Enchantress a Ronin, it's a 5/5. So of course, ongoing counters, I guess, need to be a little bit buffed. So maybe we can see Rogue as a 3/3, Enchantress as a 4/6. But this one honestly needs a lot of testing because like if you give them a little bit too much, they become overplayed and they become just like, oh, tempoing Enchantress as a 4/6 is never bad. Do we want it to be
Yeah.
never bad? I think it might be a
I
problem
want
if
it to
it's
be never bad.
never bad.
But,
But it's a
like,
problem, isn't it? Like if it's never bad,
I
like
don't
there's no
think so.
price tag to
I don't think
playing a
so. I don't
4/6
think that's a
Enchantress
problem.
now.
I think it's fine. I will say one issue that this raises to me specifically is if, like, this is the kind of thing that can really screw up forward testing, right? Like,
Mm,
if you are wrong, or if let's say like let's say like I work for Second Dinner, I pitch this, or like let's do this 4/6 Enchantress, it'll be so sick, right? And like whoever's been testing stuff has been testing with 4 or 5 Enchantress, and they just haven't been testing with like an Enchantress that's a 4/6 in like 20% of decks, right? And that is the kind of like knock on effect that can really mess something up, right? Like that like if there's any reason why this wouldn't happen, it's because it's such a hard, it's the kind of thing that can really mess up months and months and months in advance of work. Things you
yes.
were testing in environment A that are now just no longer a consideration because of something like that. But I genuinely do think Enchantress can get a point of power. I do think that it can. People talk about like, oh, there's no cost to running it, and it's like, dude, Shang-Chi's in 40% of decks. Like, there's clearly no cost to running it. Well, there's clearly already stuff where there's like no cost to running this tech card. Just let other cards approach that level, and it will be less the obvious ubiquitous option. Is my pitch.
Yeah, I think the baseline idea also is that Shang-Chi's effect is like the most generically useful as well, right? Because like you
Yes.
said, the stuff being more than 10 power is way easier in the grand scheme of things than always seeing a specific good ongoing card to hit, right? Like at least the way the game is right now, like, big cards are more common than just good ongoings, right? Like you can play against 10 opponents and like they will have like 9 out of 10 have a big card, but would 9 out of 10 of them have a good ongoing? Currently no. So I guess that is why Shang-Chi is also widely
Yeah.
it's just too easy to fit, right, into
Right.
everything.
So that's what that hence my Enchantress suggestion, right? Like
Yeah.
we agree Shang-Chi is too easy to fit. What if we made this other card very easy to fit too? Just on curve, great, 4/6, no downside, just get it done, bam, in everything. Then you actually have to think about, do I run Shang-Chi or do I run this? You actually have to think about it. If you have one slot left, it matters.
But if Enchantress gets to a level whereby it's like okay to run in everything, you also like reduce the ability to ever see other ongoing decks, right? It's the
Yeah,
same
that
thing.
is
So it's
that
like the
is
balance is super hard. But at
that
least
is
for now,
true.
I don't think there is a concern now. There's not like anyway ongoings more than big dudes right now
Yeah.
for sure. So
Finally, let's just take a moment and say, I think we finally did it. I think we finally hit a good metagame. Loki's mid, Blob is good, but not what it was. Miss Marvel is actually maybe still a problem. We'll see. But other than that, like we are finally at an open, wide-ranging metagame where you can pick one of many different decks and take it and run with it. And I am extremely happy with that. So this is what we're going to be calling a breath of fresh air. Everyone just enjoy it while it's here. Seriously, please do, because I do think that as much as we're harsh on the polarized metagames that we've had previously, the very unipolar metagames, I should say, where it's just like one deck is clearly better than everything else, I do think we should also praise Second Dinner when the game is good. And the game is good right now. So great job on the balance. Amazing job on the blob rework, managing to make
yes.
Thanos still a good deck with blob, managing to make blob still worth buying if you wanted to play Thanos. Like that's really good. And also managing to make it no longer an enormous balance issue. Like that is, they nailed it. I gotta say, I think that like that last balance patch, just getting blob reduced, and like the way they handled Blob and Miss Marvel deserves commendation in as much as we can give them. Like those are really well handled nerfs that did a lot without reducing the reason you would buy the card. And I think that that is really hard to do, and I'm very happy that they did it, especially in the context of having previous situations like Elsa and Werewolf where they were unable to do that. So
Yeah.
I am very grateful that we are in a metagame that I view as shaped by those good decisions. Blob's still good, Miss Marvel's still good. They're still relevant in the metagame, but they're not overpoweringly sucky and terrible, and that is a win.
It's really what you just said, and like to further add on to that, like the blob change. Okay, I want to say nerf blob change means Marvel nerf, but it's like I'm just gonna call it a change because it really changed everything, right? The blob change and the Miss Marvel change kept them relevant, but it also kept everything else like possible, right? Because of these
Yes.
changes, right? Recently in my latest tournament, there was even a Thatcher Black Bolt good cards deck that made it to the top 8. A feels good deck. It's been a very long time since we could see feels good decks have a chance, right? Like even earlier we talked about being able to like okay, sure, we can play some combo stuff and get away with it right now. Like you can get away with a lot right now. Like to me personally, what I would call this meta is a relaxing meta. And
Yes.
it's not wrong. It's fine. Like it's totally fine to not have to grind out this Loki by night bounce wolf here and there metas like every day. Like sometimes you don't need this. This meta is like the one size fits all meta. Like anyone can do fine in this meta. And once in a while we need those, right? The last time we had something similar to this, similar, not exactly the same, similar to this was like the Silk Smooth meta,
Yeah.
where like the gap between what is really obviously good and what is maybe good is not very big. right? Like the maybe good decks versus the obviously popular decks are not that far. They're not that far. It's like kind of close.
I have an
So
insane take here. You can tell a meta is good because Destroy is playable.
yeah,
That's my insane take
true.
because Destroy is the exact same deck as it always has been. And
Yes.
when Destroy is playable, there are a wide range of decks that are like a little bit worse than Destroy, which are less playable but still playable whenever Destroy is, and that means the meta is good. That's my theory.
The funny thing is, as much as I want to say I don't really agree, but it's the way it has been. Yeah,
Yeah.
like it's not like I fully agree that there's a correlation. I don't think there's a correlation per se, but like I guess when destroy is like not difficult to play, it just
Yeah.
happens to seem like other decks are also just viable at the same time, you know. So yeah, I guess we can go with that angle. But yeah, no, personally I'm excited for this meta, not because like I know exactly what I should be doing every single point in time. Like Loki was one of those metas for me. But like this meta is more like I can stream anything and I don't feel
Yes.
like I'm shortchanging my win rate. Like
Yes.
as a streamer, like sometimes people ask me, oh, you played Loki for 2 months. Are you not sick of it? Well, I win with Loki. But the thing is, now I can win with other things comfortably. And like I don't have to worry also about like this deck being not great enough to just climb if I just want to climb. Like
Yep.
everything is viable. So it's good. It's good. We're good now.
And with that, we're out of here. As always, I've been Cam Best. Remember to like and subscribe. Leave a comment. I still read every single comment. I haven't said that in a while. It's still true. I read every comment on my channel, even though I like every time I mention that to another creator, they're like, why would you do that? But I do. Lamby, take us out.
Thank you so much for being here once again. This is going to be up on KM Best channel. Do like, comment, subscribe. And because he reads all the comments, please leave some nice comments. And we will see you in the next one on my channel. Bye-bye.